23 hours alone. What really happens inside ADX Florence cells? The steel door slams shut with a sound that echoes like a gunshot through the concrete hallway. Inside a 6 by 9 foot cell at ADX Florence, a man begins to scream. Not words. Just raw noise. Correctional officers freeze for a split second. They are used to silence here. Total silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. But this sound is different. It bounces off the reinforced walls. It shakes the heavy metal door. It keeps going. On the small camera screen in the control room, they watch him pace. Back and forth. Back and forth. 23 hours a day alone. Concrete bed. Concrete desk. Concrete walls. A narrow slit of a window showing only sky. No other inmates. No voices. No touch. Suddenly, he stops. He presses his forehead against the steel door and starts pounding it with both fists. The alarm sounds. Boots rush down the tier. Keys rattle. Radios crackle. The Special Operations Response Team prepares outside the range. No one at ADX takes sudden behavior lightly. This prison was built for the most dangerous men in America. The inmate's name is Robert Knott. Years earlier, he murdered a correctional officer inside a federal prison. For that, he was sent here, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. A place designed after deadly prison violence in the 1980s proved that regular high-security prisons were not enough. Inside his cell, Knott begins tearing at the thin mattress. Foam flies. He shouts that the walls are closing in. He says he cannot breathe. Officers issue commands through the door slot. He does not respond. This is the moment staff at ADX fear most, not an escape attempt, not a riot, but a psychological break inside a soundproof concrete box. Because here, there are no cellmates to calm you down. No one to talk to. Only your own thoughts. The team suits up in protective gear. A shield is raised. The food slot opens slightly as they try to assess the situation. Knott lunges toward it. The slot slams shut just in time. The hallway fills with tension. Every movement is controlled. Every step calculated. One mistake in this prison can cost a life. And as the officers prepare to enter the cell, one question hangs in the cold Colorado air. What really happens to a human mind after years of 23-hour-a-day isolation? To understand this moment, the screaming, the pounding, the fear, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to the crime. Back to the system that created a prison like ADX Florence. And back to the long, silent days that led to this breaking point. Years before the screaming inside that concrete box, Robert Knott was already known as one of the most violent inmates in the federal system. In 1988, while serving time for armed robbery and other serious federal crimes at the United States Penitentiary, Marion, Knott attacked correctional officer Merle Klutz. The assault was sudden and brutal. Klutz later died from his injuries. The killing sent shockwaves through the Bureau of Prisons. At that time, USP Marion was already operating under permanent lockdown because of earlier inmate murders. Prison officials believed they were running the most secure system possible. But the death of Officer Klutz proved something terrifying. Even the highest security prisons were not enough to control certain inmates. Knott was convicted of murder and received additional life sentences. He had shown that he could kill even in a controlled prison environment. The federal government faced a serious question. Where do you send a man who murders inside prison? The answer was already being built in the mountains of Colorado. In 1994, the Bureau of Prisons opened ADX Florence, officially known as the Administrative Maximum Facility. It was designed for inmates considered too dangerous for any other federal prison. Terrorists, organized crime leaders, and inmates who had killed behind bars. Knott was transferred there. The journey itself was silent. Shackles on wrists. Shackles on ankles. Belly chain locked tight. Armed federal marshals on both sides. No conversation. No eye contact. When he arrived, there was no dramatic intake line. No crowded yard. No loud cell block noise. Just concrete. His new home was a single cell with a solid steel door and a narrow window angled so he could not see the horizon. The bed was poured from cement. The desk was cement. The stool was cement. Even the shower was inside the cell, controlled from the outside. He would spend 23 hours a day alone. Meals came through a slot. Recreation meant 1 hour in a small, enclosed outdoor cage, alone. Phone calls were rare. Human touch was non-existent. At first, staff reports described him as controlled, quiet, compliant. But isolation does not make noise at the beginning. It builds slowly. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. The silence became constant. No conversations drifting through walls. Cells at ADX are built thick enough to prevent inmates from talking to each other. In that silence, something began to change. Officers noted pacing, talking to himself. Long stretches of staring at the wall. Then came the first disciplinary report for erratic behavior. And the system designed to contain violence began to show cracks of its own. By the time Robert Knott had spent years inside ADX Florence, the routine had become mechanical. Lights on. Tray through the slot. Silence. Recreation alone in a concrete yard with walls so high you can only see a square of sky. Lights out. 23 hours a day inside the same 6 by 9 foot space. At first, prison psychologists believed strict structure would keep order. ADX was built after deadly violence in federal prisons during the 1980s, including killings at United States Penitentiary, Marion. The goal was simple: separate the most dangerous inmates so completely that they could never harm anyone again. And in one way, it worked. There were no riots inside ADX. No gang wars in the yard. No surprise attacks in crowded dining halls. Every movement was controlled by remote doors and monitored by cameras. But another problem began growing behind those steel doors. Reports from federal lawsuits and court filings later described inmates at ADX who experienced extreme anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and self-harm. Some banged their heads against walls. Some swallowed sharp objects. Some smeared waste on the floor in mental breakdowns. Staff were trained to handle violence, but mental collapse was different. Knott's behavior became more unstable. Officers documented long periods where he would refuse to eat. Other times he paced non-stop for hours. He filed complaints saying the isolation was destroying his mind. He claimed he could hear things in the silence. Medical staff checked on him through the slot. Conversations were short, clinical, controlled. But there was no therapy room. No group sessions. Treatment happened inside the same concrete box where he slept. The psychological weight of isolation became a national issue. Civil rights groups argued that long-term solitary confinement at ADX could cause permanent mental damage. In 2012, a federal lawsuit challenged conditions at the prison, claiming inmates with serious mental illness were being kept in extreme isolation without proper care. Inside his unit, Knott's outbursts grew more frequent. One afternoon, officers conducting routine rounds noticed he had stopped responding. He stood motionless in the center of the cell, staring at the door. Minutes passed. Then he began laughing. Not loudly. Not wildly. Just a slow, steady laugh that echoed off concrete. The control room camera zoomed in. Officers exchanged looks. They had seen violence before. They had seen anger. But this was something else, something quiet and unpredictable. Later that week came the screaming. The mattress torn apart. The pounding on the steel door. Now, as the response team gathers outside his cell, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. ADX was built to stop dangerous men from hurting others. But what happens when the prison itself begins breaking the men inside it? And tonight, the officers are about to find out just how far that breaking point can go. The order is given. The cell door at ADX Florence slides open with a heavy mechanical grind. The response team moves in tight formation. Shield first. Commands loud and clear. Robert Knott stands near the back wall, breathing hard, fists clenched. Pieces of mattress foam cover the concrete floor like snow. He does not charge. He does not speak. For a moment, he just stares. Officers secure him quickly, following procedure step by step. Hands restrained. Ankles restrained. Medical staff step in to evaluate him. Everything is controlled. Clinical. Precise. That is how ADX survives, through control. Knott is escorted out of the cell and placed in restraints for observation. The torn mattress is removed. The cell is searched inch by inch. No hidden weapons. No contraband. Just a man alone for years, unraveling inside reinforced concrete. In the days that follow, reports are written. Psychologists conduct evaluations. His behavior is reviewed by administrators. Under pressure from lawsuits filed by inmates and civil rights groups, the Federal Bureau of Prisons had already begun adjusting policies for mentally ill prisoners. Some inmates were later transferred out of ADX to medical facilities after court rulings required better mental health screening. The system was slowly changing. But change inside a Supermax prison moves at the speed of policy, not emotion. Knott remained in extreme isolation. Like every inmate there, he ate alone, exercised alone, slept alone. His contact with the world was filtered through thick glass and narrow slots in steel doors. There were no riots at ADX. No daring escapes. The design worked exactly as intended. Since opening in 1994, no inmate has ever successfully escaped from ADX Florence. Violence between prisoners is almost impossible because they never share space. From a security standpoint, it is one of the most effective prisons in the world. But effectiveness comes with a cost that cannot be measured in locks or cameras. Former inmates and court documents have described years of silence so deep it feels physical. Some prisoners have said they forgot how to hold normal conversations. Others said they began fearing their own thoughts. Guards, too, have spoken about the emotional weight of working in a place where human contact is reduced to commands through metal doors. Robert Knott entered ADX because he killed inside prison. ADX ensured he would never have that chance again. Yet his breakdown raised a harder question, one still debated in courts, newsrooms, and government offices across the United States. When you lock a human being alone for 23 hours a day, are you preventing danger? Or creating a different kind of damage? Inside the silent concrete halls of ADX Florence, that question still echoes, unanswered.